Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 14 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson. And on this particular show, I'm really excited to have Mike Hinrichs of Krieger barrels. So I spent a lot of time with Mike at the Great American Outdoor Show. I've talked to Mike on the phone for probably more than a decade of asking him lots of great questions, a lot of them coming from customers directly on different things that they hear and, different opinions. So I've always leaned on Mike for his expertise. He is generally just a great guy to hang out with and talk to, just a huge personality and fun guy to hang around with. So I'm really excited to have Mike here for an interview and to spend some time talking about barrels, really important to us in long-range shooting. So without further ado, here we go. All right, so I'm really glad to have Mike with us today from Krieger Barrels. Mike got a chance to join us at the Great American Outdoor Show. He helped in the booth a couple of days, and it was really awesome to hang out with him. Just a wealth of knowledge and how long he's been in the barrel making industry and such a great personality. So I was excited to bring him on. So Mike, welcome to the podcast and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast and thanks a lot for the invite to the Great American Outdoor Show. That was a lot of fun. It
was a great show. Lots of people, lots of good conversations. And I thought it was really important to bring you on and talk a little bit about barrels because I have the same conversation with customers when they call and they're getting ready to order a custom rifle. And a lot of the information that I give to them makes me sound really smart, but honestly, it's from me calling you there at the shop and just basically saying, hey, somebody asked me this question. So I don't want to take all the credit for all the great stuff that you passed along over the years.
Well, good. Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions for gunsmith customers, for individual customers, shooters. That's what we have got a phone line for.
And just to give some background about what your history is there with Krieger, can you go over a little bit about how long you've been there and how many parts of the business you've actually been involved in with all the years there?
Sure. I've been here since 2002. Started off in the rifling department, rifling some of the semi-auto barrels, the AR-15s, M14s, M1 Grands. Moved on to some bolt gun blanks, and they eventually needed someone in the office that knew shooting sports, knew our processes, reloading, could talk to customers, and I moved up into the office. Since then, I've been involved with the FFL books, logging customers' rifles in and out back when we did fittings, and have moved up to sales manager and customer service here. So I've been here, it'll be 17 years this month.
What do you like to do as far as hunting? What's your hobbies in shooting? Are you involved in any type of competition shooting, anything like that?
Yeah, I really started out, first gun I ever shot was my uncle's .357 Magnum Ruger Blackhawk, and was hooked on it from then. Been deer hunting since I was 16 in Wisconsin. I've gone on a couple of prairie dog trips, varmint hunting, little bit of bird hunting and things like that, but not much. It's mostly been rifle, whitetail deer hunting in Wisconsin. Started competitive shooting with bullseye pistol in the late 80s, and I think the year after that started shooting high-power rifle in NRA service rifle competition. Did that for a lot of years, and when F-Class came out, built an F-Class rifle and started shooting long range. So I've been continuously shooting for, if I had to do the math, I'd say probably 35, 36 years.
That is awesome. And with the F-Class, are you still shooting in that type of competition now?
Yeah, absolutely. I've transitioning from a 300 Win Mag that is great in the wind, but it beats you up shooting it for a weekend, to a 284 Winchester on a custom action, Macmillan stock, all of that.
Nice. And how often do you get out and actually get a chance to shoot? Seems like everybody that gets in this industry ends up having to sacrifice some of their shooting career to stay in it. I mean, do you still get a chance to go out and shoot a lot?
I wouldn't say a lot. Couple matches a year, mostly local matches here in Lodi, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. I did get the opportunity a couple of years ago to travel to Raton, New Mexico to shoot the F-Class Worlds. That was a lot of fun. Finished around the middle of the pack, which I thought was pretty good for someone that shoots a couple times a year. But yeah, it's not nearly as often as our customers are shooting. They're, a lot of them are going through 2-3 barrels a year shooting F-Class. I'm on my 5th or 6th year with my F-Class rifle without having to change the barrel yet. So
it happens a lot.
Yeah.
When people call into Krieger, how many people there answer the phones and take the orders?
Really, starting this week, it's 3. We had a person, Todd, come in from the shop to start working on phones and taking orders and things like that. But it's up until this past week, it's just been myself and Che on the phones.
And the part that I find fascinating is that when you call in, you actually, take the orders over the phone rather than just shifting people off the internet. Do you find that helps catch things to help make sure that you get it right for the customer? I mean, in a day and age where everybody wants to they want you to log in and place your order and minimize the amount of time and effort and manual labor involved in taking the order, it's sort of amazing that you still do that. And is there a reason why? What's the benefit to the customer?
Well, the huge benefit to the customer is that we're talking to them one-on-one. We can answer their questions. They're not just checking boxes on an online form. We do offer that. We do have an online form that if you know what you need, you can check the boxes and click submit, and you never have to make a phone call. You can do it at 2:30 in the morning or do it on your lunch break at work, and it doesn't take a lot of time. But if someone has questions, especially first-time rifle builders or first-time orderers of custom barrels, It's a huge benefit because they can get everything taken care of in one phone call. We can answer all their questions related to ordering a barrel, and it kind of streamlines their experience in getting a custom rifle barrel.
Do you find that sometimes after speaking with the customer with their initial talking about what they were thinking of ordering, do you find that sometimes changes by the end of the phone call, whether it's twist rate or contour or all the other things that you get involved in?
Oh, a lot of times, because they kind of call with an idea of what they think they need, but without the background knowledge of what someone needs for a first-time build, we get to answer a lot of those questions and not necessarily change the route that they're going, but help clarify what they need to do if they say they're building an F-Class rifle and they think they want this twist rate. Well, people in F-Class aren't shooting that bullet that would stabilize in that twist rate, so we can kind of guide them in those directions as well.
What are some common things that you think people really need the most help with when they call in?
Well, usually it's like you mentioned, twist rates are probably the most important technical part that a customer needs help with. And if a bullet is brand new, we might not have the information on it, but we know where to get that information, and we can usually get an answer back to them pretty quick. One of the other aspects that they ask a lot of questions about is contours. What kind of contour do I need? That gets to another question of, well, what are you doing with the rifle? If it's strictly a sporting rifle, we can guide them that direction. If it's strictly a target rifle, we can guide them in that direction. One of the toughest questions to answer is when they say they want to build a hunting/target rifle. So you end up compromising and getting the worst of both worlds when you try to build one rifle to do many different things. So that's where we can help out a lot with barrel weights and just personal experience, because we are hunters and we are competitive shooters. We know what works on both ends of that. So we can help out with decisions in that direction as well.
Yeah, I wrote an article a while back. It was called The Purpose-Built Rifle, and it really came out of a lot of customers calling and wanting to build a rifle, and they start off by wanting to make it weigh 7 pounds, but they want to be able to shoot a sniper match or tactical match, and they want to be able to shoot it to a mile, and they take this what would have been a perfect rifle for what they really wanted to use it for, and they slowly but surely drive it into the ditch with a rifle that will do okay at a lot of different stuff, but really not do great at anything.
Right. That's we have kind of a similar saying here when everybody wants the 5-pound F-Class 18-inch barrel in a Magnum cartridge that still gets maximum velocity, that they can take backpacking on a sheep hunt and still win their local long-range match with. And that's like 4 different rifles.
It really is. It really is.
So,
We talked about this the other day on the phone, and I probably used up, 3 phone calls last week speaking with you because we've been working on contours, and we're trying to marry the accuracy without going overboard on the weight, and we're trying to ride that line to where you could take the rifle varmint hunting but still use it in competition. And I guess we're trying to find out at what point is it diminishing returns on a heavy barrel. With ours are more tactical rifles, so we're not shooting the 28 and 30 inch, long barrels. Most of ours are 22, 26. But when it comes to the contours themselves, do you find that there's an area to where eventually they just get too big, too heavy in diameter for a particular type of shooting?
Yeah, and it's all based on what a customer has for tolerance level on how much weight they want to carry around. But we've really found kind of the balance between the two is, oddly enough, the Remington varmint contour. It's still heavy. I mean, on a standard stock and a standard action and reasonable glass on the top, it's still going to be an 11, maybe a 12-pound rifle. But for a lot of people, that's not too heavy for a hunting rifle. It's also a rigid, heavy enough contour that it produces really good accuracy. Obviously, the heavier you go with the entire rifle and the barrel included, the more stable the rifle is, the easier it is to shoot groups, the more it absorbs recoil just through mass. But if you put a Remington varmint contoured barreled rifle in a rest, and you put something with like a number 17 heavy varmint or an 1 1/4 inch straight blank, I'd really expect the same kind of practical accuracy out of it. The heavier barrel is going to be easier to shoot, so you might get more consistent groups with it, but mechanical accuracy is going to be about the same.
So you get the added benefits of just the heavier rifle. So you see, like in PRS, you got guys really going and trying to build 19 and 20-pound rifles and just adding weights to make it heavier to manage that part of it. But as far as accuracy goes, at some point, there really isn't that much more of a mechanical accuracy advantage. It's just adding weight to the rifle.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what we put it that way to the customer, that it's mechanical accuracy. The difference between mechanical accuracy and being able to shoot the rifle accurately can certainly depend on weight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you take a 7-pound 300 Win Mag, it probably could shoot a lot more accurate than what most guys can actually shoot it just because of the walloping they're going to get when they pull the trigger.
Right.
Talk to us about the cut rifling and what Krieger does. I'm a big fan of it. I mean, obviously, it's all that we use, really, as far as our stainless steel barrels. It's just you guys have that consistent quality, and to me, that's probably the most important part. You also use cut rifling, so maybe you could talk a little bit about the process you guys go through when you make a barrel and why you do cut rifling compared to button rifled and maybe the benefits.
Oh, sure. Well, the single point cut rifling, the main benefits of that are you're not adding any stresses to the steel with the rifling process, and we are able to much more uniformly control bore and groove dimensions and twist rate. And I say that because with button rifling, you're kind of at the mercy of the steel. If you pull a button through the steel, and it's really buttoning is kind of a cold swaging process where it just pushes material out of the way. It doesn't remove any material when it imprints the rifling. But you're at the mercy of the steel, because if that steel hardness changes from one end of the bar to the other, bore and groove dimensions can change, your twist rate can actually change, and you just end up with a barrel that's not as uniform as a single point cut rifled barrel. Now, not to say a button rifled barrel can't be uniform. Their button rifle barrel makers are some of our biggest competitors. It is much quicker to button rifle a barrel than a cut rifled barrel, but we feel the single point cut rifling process produces a better barrel in a higher percentage of times than button rifling does. And that's why we use it. We just feel it's a better process to produce a better quality barrel.
I know that on a website that's one of our competitors here, as far as a custom builder, we had talked a little bit about different ways that we build, and always having a side conversation. But I did notice that he had this priced that was with a button rifle barrel, and if you wanted a hand-lapped single point cut match grade barrel, it was an additional $125. Do you find that it's more expensive to manufacture cut rifled barrels?
It is more expensive to manufacture because it takes a longer amount of time. A button rifled barrel can be rifled in anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds, where a single point cut rifle barrel takes about an hour to rifle. Oddly enough, we are very close in our retail price to most of the good button rifle barrel manufacturers. So really the cost shouldn't be a big deal, because we do have to remain competitive with the button barrel makers, because they do make good barrels. We feel we make a higher percentage of better barrels than the button barrel makers do.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you'll see sometimes, I don't know how much of this is true. I've built on button rifle barrels that customers have supplied, but we don't purchase them here. You'll hear some people say that the button rifled barrels will last, let's just say for a 6.5 Creedmoor, I've heard people say this, 1,800, 2,000 rounds or 1,500 rounds in a cut rifled barrel will last longer. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've seen over the decades that we've been in business. It's nothing that we advertise, because the second you advertise it, someone will have a barrel that shoots out faster than their last button rifle barrel, and they're on the phone. Mm-hmm. But in general, single point cut rifle barrels do last longer. We've seen up to 30 to even 50% longer than a button rifled barrel. There's theories behind that. I think the most valid theory is that the button rifling, because you're cold swaging the rifling into the steel, you're kind of pre-stressing the steel. So it's almost like you're starting out with rounds on the barrel. Where the cut rifling, you're not doing that. You're not stressing the steel. You're actually cutting material away about 1/10,000th of an inch on a pass. So we're just not adding any stress to the steel during that process.
And so, a Krieger barrel, for example, might cost $330 retail. You take a button rifle barrel. I don't know what they sell for, but they could probably run anywhere from $200 to $300. But you got a barrel that may last 20-30% longer. That means a lot.
It does, yeah. And the barrel lasting longer. If there's a 30% price difference and it lasts 30% longer, you're even. But you also don't have that gunsmithing cost involved for that last 30% that you're getting out of a cut rifled barrel versus a button barrel.
You don't have to send it back as often to get it redone.
Right.
And then how about break-in? What do you recommend for barrel break-in?
Well, everyone's recommended barrel break-in, if they have a break-in procedure, they're all a little bit different, but if you kind of stand back and look at them all, they're all pretty similar. Our recommendation on a stainless barrel is about 5 to 10 shots of shooting one shot and then clean. And then once you see the number of patches it takes to clean the barrel out, to clean the copper fouling out, when you see that reduce, you can switch to like a couple of 2 or 3 shot groups and clean, and then a 5 shot group and clean. I've had customers call and say, hey, I put 5 rounds through my stainless Krieger and I'm not getting any copper out of it. And I tell them, you're done breaking it in. Just shoot it. And the break-in procedure really is far more dependent on how smooth the throat is in the chamber. The barrel itself, the rifling, is all hand finish lap. There really isn't any break-in needed in the rifling itself. It's really just that throat area of the chamber where the chambering reamer cut.
Yeah, they get scarring, they get chips in there that can damage it or burr it up a little bit, and basically they're trying to break the throat in.
Yeah, and that, things like that, if you've got heavier tooling marks in the throat, or you drag, the reamer dragged a chip around the throat, that's going to take longer to break in because you've got a higher void area of high and low spots in that throat. Mm-hmm. Where if it's a nice smooth chamber, the gunsmith just took a little bit out at a time and cut a very straight, smooth chamber, it really won't take many rounds to break it in at all.
We found that with us only cutting the throats into the barrel, so we don't make the chambers into the barrel, we actually manufacture separate, but because the only thing we cut into the barrel is the throat, we don't have the chips and all the other stuff being forced in through there with the reamer, that, we can come out with a super nice, clean, smooth throat that really doesn't require much of a break-in, where traditional chambering, if they catch a lot of chips or they make a little bit bigger pass, they can get all that metal pushed forward up into the throat area, and it can cause some small issues. So that's one thing we're sort of happy about, that we don't have as much of that to deal with as some of the other stuff. But how about cleaning chemicals? What do you recommend as far as, because I tell you what, I bring this up. There's a lot of cleaning chemicals that I sort of bash a little bit here at the shooting school because it's so, I think, toxic to the barrel. I mean, this stuff can eat about everything, and they're just relentlessly dumping it into their barrels. Do you guys have any feedback on what you recommend, or stuff that maybe you don't like to see put in there that maybe is on the market?
Yeah, if you asked 10 guys here, you'll get 10 different answers on what they use, and they're all right because they all work. What I've personally used, I've used Hobbies number 9 as a powder and carbon solvent, and then go through and dry the bore out really well. One of my favorite products for copper cleaning is the Wipeout foaming bore cleaner, but you have to have time for it. It's got to sit for 24 hours, but it does a great job of cleaning all the copper out. Some of the copper solvents that I'll use, like if I've got to clean between matches, between days at a match or something, I will use either Sweet 762 or Barnes CR10 as a copper solvent. Those are very aggressive copper solvents. They've got a high ammonia content to them. You cannot mix them with other chemicals, and don't leave them in the bore too long, or they will eat a barrel up.
Yeah.
But they are very fast at removing copper. You just have to make sure you patch them out really good, and then neutralize it with just with a light gun oil, soaked in a patch, so it kind of neutralizes all of that copper solvent that's left in the bore in the little corners, because that will destroy a barrel if it's left in too long.
Yeah, we had a local bench rest that we built a 6BR for that should have lasted 4,000 rounds, and at 900 rounds it come back in that it stopped shooting. And I looked in the barrel with the bore scope, and it looked like somebody etched it with a tattoo gun. It was just all eaten. And I asked him, of course, bench rest, they really do clean their rifles a lot, but he was literally letting this stuff soak in there, and he destroyed his barrel long before it was due.
Yeah, you can certainly do that, both with chemicals and cleaning methods. Things that you should never put through a barrel is like a stainless steel brush. That will eat up the rifling. Bronze brushes and the hard nylon brushes, the good ones that you get from like Sinclair, those are fine. You just have to be careful that when you exit the muzzle with the brush, that you don't pull it back in across the crown. That can prematurely wear a crown out with a brush. Even with dirty patches, if you push a patch of carbon, that's taken a lot of carbon out of the barrel, and then pull it back in across the crown, it can prematurely wear the crown out. Now, it's a slow process. It's not going to wear it out the first time you do it, but it does add. If you clean your rifle a lot, if you shoot it a lot, people mostly over-clean rifle barrels, and you just don't have to get it surgically clean for it to shoot well.
What about stress in a barrel? I know one of the reasons why we strictly use you for the stainless barrels is we shoot a lot of long range, and the way that we shoot, we heat the barrels up like crazy, and sometimes they just don't get a chance to cool down. And stress in a barrel will kill you. If you're warming the barrel up, or like when we shoot suppressed, the barrels get really hot. They change your point of impact and all of these other things. How do you guys control that? Because one of the reasons why I love your barrels so much is that we found that this really has never been an issue.
Yeah, well, we get the steel directly from the mill, and it's double stress relieved when we get it. So from a stress standpoint, the steel is just literally dead from a stress standpoint. And then the processes that we do, the turning processes and rifling processes, we're taking material off in such small increments that we're just not adding any stresses to the steel with tool pressure. So we're not creating any more stresses. Now, every once in a while, you see a piece of steel that didn't get through the stress relieving process properly, or it was drawn down too fast, and we'll have issues with it, but that comes up, that's recognizable right away. You can see that when you're turning the barrel, because as you're taking material off, the barrel will actually bow during the turning process. We don't straighten any barrels. Anything that bows in turning just gets thrown in the dumpster.
Now, that brings up an interesting point. I seen a picture one time from a major manufacturer of commercial firearms where they actually paid somebody. They would spin these barrels down and straighten them. And I'm glad you said that. Is that a common practice of straightening barrels?
Yeah, in barrels that have stresses in them from the processes of manufacturing, they straighten barrels. And that actually puts even more stress back into the steel, but in different points. Mm-hmm. If you've got a barrel that's bowed and you leave it alone, it will actually shoot better than a barrel that you've tried to straighten. But yeah, that's actually pretty common in barrel manufacturing of processes that put stresses into the steel during that rifling process.
And how do they possibly straighten a barrel?
It's ugly. It's really ugly. There are machines. There's machines that they can put the barrels in on 2 pins, and they rotate it on an indicator, and they've got hydraulic presses that push the barrel one way or the other to straighten it out. I've seen barrels straightened simply by sticking the muzzle end of the blank into the end of a pallet type racking and pulling down on it, and then looking through the barrel to see how straight it is.
Oh my God!
So yeah, it's kind of an ugly process. It can be very sophisticated mechanically. It can be really ugly to watch. They both produce the same exact thing.
Wow. That is absolutely insane. Can you talk to people about the curvature of the bore? I know a lot of people, when you tell them that, especially here at the schools, when you tell them that the rifling is actually bowed inside the barrel. Now, some manufacturers are worse than others. I find that you guys probably make the straightest barrels that we can get. Can you talk a little bit about that, why it happens, and is it really that common?
Yeah, the curvature of the bore, a bowed barrel and the curvature of the bore are two very different things. A bowed barrel is where the steel has actually moved during the turning process. Mm-hmm. Curvature of the bore is caused by the drilling process, by the deep hole drilling in the gun drills. It's really tough to drill a laser straight hole 100 out of 100 times. Mm-hmm. We do get very straight drilled holes with the machinery that we use, but there is some curvature to that bore. There really, as long as there aren't any stresses in the steel, there really isn't an issue with a bore that's got a curvature to it. As long as the gunsmith recognizes that when he fits it up to the rifle, and you clock that curvature so that the curvature is up, it points up to 12 o'clock when it's installed on the rifle. When you do that, you're not constantly losing windage to the left or the right if it's pointing those directions, and you don't run out of elevation on your scope if it's pointing down.
The old woodworkers will tell you that it's impossible to drill a long, perfectly straight hole, and barrels really are no exception. It's still drilling a hole. Where does the curvature usually start? I mean, is there an area that it's the greatest, usually in the middle, or?
Well, it's when you finish the barrel, it has the greatest curvature, and if it has a curvature, it has the greatest curvature in the center, mm-hmm. because we drill our blanks before the contouring is done. So then when we contour them, we contour the barrels on centers at the muzzle and the breech. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be closest to center line at the muzzle and the breech, so it will have generally the most curvature in the center, or at some point on each side of center. Mm. But we only allow up to about 10 thousandths curvature up to a 29-inch blank. Mm-hmm. So if it's got more curvature in the bore than that, and we catch it, that's a barrel that we won't rifle. Not because there's a quality issue with it, but because it causes more work for the gunsmith.
Yeah, it does. It actually will rob the accuracy out of the rifle. If they don't measure the curvature of the bore out, as the reamer goes in, it follows that, and it cuts a crooked throat.
Right.
Yeah. So talk to me about 5R rifling. Do you guys make it? Do you find that there's any advantage to it?
Well, the 5R rifling is something that it's a modification of a Russian-style rifling that 5R was kind of coined by Boots Obermeyer with Obermeyer rifle barrels. And everyone has kind of done their version of it. people were kind of beating us up because we didn't offer it. We didn't really think any style of rifling was going to make a difference in accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's really comes down to the uniformity and the quality of the steel and the quality of the surface finish that creates good accuracy in a barrel. But we got beat up about not offering it long enough that we got Boots Obermeyer over here about 6 years ago. He showed us how to make the cutters to his style of 5R rifling, watched us make some barrels, took some measurements, kind of gave us our blessing on we're doing it the way that he did it. In the 6 years that we've offered it, we really haven't seen an accuracy difference between our traditional 4 and 6 groove barrels versus the 5R rifled barrels. Some people have claimed it's easier to clean than the 4 groove barrels. I haven't personally seen that because I've used both on my competition rifles, and my scores didn't change. The number of patches it takes to clean didn't change. My velocities were within single-digit feet per second from one barrel to another. So we really don't upsell it as a better quality of rifling or an advantage to anything. But if people want it, we do offer it in certain calibers, in standard twist rates, and it's completely up to the customer. There's no disadvantage to it other than it costs a little bit extra to do that because it does take longer to rifle a 5-groove barrel than a 4-groove barrel, and the tooling doesn't last quite as long. So there is an additional cost in doing it. But we really don't see any sort of performance advantage to it.
And then I do have one last question for you. Do you really think that the shorter barrels can be potentially more accurate because they're stiffer?
Absolutely. Given the same contour, a 20-inch barrel is going to be more rigid than a 26-inch barrel. The only reason to add length on a barrel is to gain velocity. A longer barrel is not necessarily more accurate unless you need that velocity for the distances that you're shooting. Obviously, the guys that are shooting these huge cases in this King of the 2 Mile competition, it's not going to work with an 18-inch barrel. They're going to burn 3/4 of the powder outside of the barrel, and that doesn't add to their velocity.
Right.
But on a lot of these modern cartridges, they've come out with a lot of new powders that are very efficient in smaller cases. You just don't see the velocity swing from a 20-inch to a 26-inch barrel like you used to. Our suggestion to customers has always been to pick the shortest contour that will give them the velocity that they need for the distance they're shooting.
Right.
It's kind of a lot to absorb and a lot to figure out, but in the end, they're the ones that are using it, and they're going to know better than anyone else what they're going to need to do that. The shorter barrels definitely have more accuracy potential because they're going to be more rigid given the same contour.
I personally think some of the most accurate rifles I've ever built in my life have been 17.5-inch and 18.5-inch rifles that were just, for whatever reason, would just drive them right inside one after the other. And I thought maybe that those little bit shorter barrels, they do help a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we have the Nra Annual Meeting coming up. Are you going to be at the annual meeting?
Yep, I will be there. Myself, Che, and Todd will all be there, along with John Krieger. I forgot the booth number off the top of my head, but we're right off one of the corners of the Springfield Armory booth, so we should be easy to find.
Is there anything you'd like to throw out there about your experiences with Krieger, or just some common stuff to throw out there for customers that are thinking of calling in and ordering a barrel?
Yeah, the biggest thing is don't be intimidated on trying to make a choice on what you want to build. The best advice I give people are to be absolutely honest with yourself on what you want to build this rifle for. If you're building a hunting rifle, build a hunting rifle. Don't build a sniper rifle. Don't build a target rifle. Build a hunting rifle. If you're going to build a target rifle that you think you want to take shooting, be prepared that you're going to have an 18-pound rifle that you're going to take hunting. Just be honest with yourself on the build and what you want to do, what you want that rifle to be, and build the best rifle you can for that application.
That is great advice. And, thank you so much for taking all the time to come on the podcast and share lots of great information. And I'll tell everybody out there, don't be afraid to call in. I mean, I probably sometimes call you 2 or 3 times a week asking questions or ordering this, or even trying to edge that line on contours to make sure that we're not making it more heavier than it has to be. So I always really appreciate your patience when I call in. And Mike, thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Mike. Mike Hinrichs will be at the Nra Annual Meeting at Krieger Barrels booth. If you get a chance to stop by and say hi to them, their booth number is 2920 at the Nra Annual Meeting. Stop by, say hi, introduce yourself, tell them that you heard them on the podcast, ask them some questions. A great guy to talk to and a wealth of knowledge. So I wanted to thank him for joining us. You know, when it comes to picking out the barrels, the quality of the barrel is sort of like where the rubber meets the road. And I don't want to say that I'm a barrel snob, because that wouldn't be true at all. But I am really, really, really picky. And the work that we do when building an entire rifle, you know, we've got our action, we've got our stock, we've got our bottom metal, and then we end up getting into the barrel and the chamber. The bullet is leaving the cartridge and has to go through that barrel and start down that range as accurate as possible. And, you know, the barrel is one of those things that's just, it is so critical that the quality be there. And one of the reasons, and, you know, Krieger, just to be fair and to throw this out there, they do not sponsor the podcast. We take no sponsorships here whatsoever. You know, everything is about trying to interview people in the industry, get their honest opinions. You know, we don't have a partnership with them. We're all friends, and we're all entitled to our own opinions, and sometimes we separate on different things. But, you know, in full disclosure, that I don't have, you know, I don't take anything from Krieger. They don't sponsor the show. I'm not paid to say any of this stuff. This is me as a builder. I really, through the years, have gone through so many different barrels, most of which the brands were sent to me by customers wanting to build a custom rifle using a barrel in hand. And so I've had lots of great opportunities to look and bore scope and shoot and build on lots of different barrels. And for me personally, I just found Krieger to be one of the most consistent quality. And so when I get 10 barrels and I bore scope them all out, I've come to expect that they're all going to look the same and that they're all going to shoot the same. I mean, the quality is just that high. And that's what you get when you pay a little bit of a premium price for the barrels. And so I do want to say that, you know, you'll see some other barrels out there that are cheaper, and you'll see, you know, other gunsmiths offering less expensive barrels to drop the price of the rifle itself. But boy, oh boy, that's like putting, a set of Pep Boy tires on your race car and going and expect to do a turn at 200 mile an hour. You're probably going to slide off the track. I do think that just as important as every other part of the rifle, gosh, the barrel is right up there at the top of the list on it. Just really has to be of that quality. They've been a great company to work with through the years. I know I bothered, you know, Mike and Shay 1,000 times asking them questions when something would be brought up to my attention or a customer would ask a question. I didn't know the answer, so I always went to the pros and said, hey, somebody asked this or asked that. And so they've been so patient with me through the years with all the questions that I would ask and explaining stuff and going into detail. It was just an absolute pleasure. So I'm really grateful that he took the time from his day to tune in here and go over some of this on the phone with you and just to do the podcast interview itself. So Mike, if you're listening, thank you so much. On the other note here, again, we're going to be at the Nra Annual Meeting. This kicks off the weekend after Easter. Our booth number is 3963. We're on the opposite side of the hall. Please feel free to stop by, say hi, ask any questions. We really do appreciate meeting you and talking to you and answering all of your questions. So if you get in there and you get a chance, please take some time to stop over by the booth and say hi and introduce yourself. It's always our pleasure to meet you out there. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.